All right. Well, welcome to another session of Empowered Learning 101. We are so excited to be with you again this evening. We do this every Wednesday. We had a couple of times right before the election that both of us were kind of struggling with stuff, but we've been trying to be consistent in these educational platforms. We started this to hopefully help many families, through this coronavirus situation that are finding themselves in this new experience of educating their children at home. But I'm also hoping that people who maybe have their children in school, we can use some of these same techniques to just increase educational awareness in the home. Today's session was supposed to be about managing distractions. And I really struggled as I was looking over my slides of what I've taught before on this subject. And I was like, okay, this is not going to make any sense at all because we definitely will cover some of those things, but I added in improving focus and then also teaching our children some mindfulness and calming techniques, because I really felt like that's if we're having distractions, with coronavirus, where many of our activities are done, that there aren't very many activities at all. And then, and so, we want to really work on having great focus. And the coronavirus is a big distraction, but it's also causing maybe some stress in our lives as well. But before we start, I definitely want to give a big shout out, a big thank you to the Idaho Freedom Action. They help sponsor these courses, and you should look them up, the idahofreedomaction.org, because if they care about educational freedom this much to help provide these courses, I definitely think we should look into what they do and help support them. Just a quick introduction about myself. My name is Rebecca Bowman, and I have been married to my sweetheart for 26 years. I actually began online and homeschooling 16 years ago on accident as we were working on trying to start a charter school in this area, but I just loved it so much. I just kept going for a lot of different reasons, for sure. I'm also a podcaster with the Luminous Mind. You can actually find the schedule for these courses on the luminousmind.net, as well as links and a lot of the video of past recordings. So that's a little bit about me. We're going to I want to turn some time over to Dustin Hertz. He's our IFA representative who's helping to moderate the chat and here to also help me when I get a little bit spacey. He had some amazing comments. Do you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself too, Dustin? I think this is 7. This is 7. Yeah. Well, we've done a few of them. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, great. And I'm hoping that you'll chime in a lot because, like I said, I just reworked this today, which is always a little bit scary, but I just felt drawn to do that to make it more applicable to what we're doing, in these very interesting times that we're in right now. If you're joining us, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about yourself, like in the chat. Here are some great questions that you could answer, like give us your name, maybe your family dynamics, where you're located, what kind of family education you're doing, and maybe where you're struggling and how we can help you. I would love to get any input as we go through these sessions. I really like hearing from people as we're working on trying to prepare other classes of how we can best help you. The cool thing about these classes is that there's nothing salesy in it. I mean, if you've watched any of our last 7, you see, I mean, the most we talk about is just letting your legislature or your representatives know, what you're doing, and any way that they can help you and assist you in this journey as well. And really, that's all, just to be a good public citizen of just making sure that these freedoms continue for yourself and for other people. So the last time we met, we actually talked about maintaining that momentum, sustaining the momentum, and some motivation. We talked a little bit about award systems and, creating that environment for self-motivated or self-directed students. And really, regardless of where you're schooling your children, I hope that's really your focus of trying to, we care less about grades and more about how this is going to impact this young person's life into adulthood, and how we can help create an environment that those kids come out with a desire to continue learning and growing. Because I think to be successful in, the future, we're going to have to be able to unlearn and relearn on a dime. You can find these recordings, like I said, at theluminousmind.net. I don't know if this one is up yet. I think we're still working on getting that one ready, but just stay tuned, and and we will. Well, no, I mean, I haven't pushed it either. I haven't really even, so it's not. We'll just be working on that. Just stay tuned, and we'll be sure to get these recordings up as soon as possible. So like I said, today we're going to talk about managing those distractions. And usually when I teach this focus, we talk about minimizing distractions for children, which we will, getting your social network on board for your family learning, which I'm finding at this part of our world, that's really not a problem anymore. There are many people that are totally understanding why you're doing this now. So we're just going to lightly touch on that. We're going to touch on mentoring your own children by managing your own life. And creating better focus. And then I added in like teaching mind calming techniques for kids and for yourself, and also how to create more peace in your home through troubling times. So I kind of wanted to, as we are minimizing distractions, there's a lot of extra things being thrown in at us right now that we haven't seen in the past. And so we're going to touch a little bit on that kind of thing. So this is I love to do resource pages because I really feel like, for one, to be a good mentor to your children, you should go and study these things as well. We're just lightly touching on most things anyway through these classes, and it's really great for you to dive more deep and learn a little bit more. I think that's how we change this mindset about educating ourselves and educating our children, is when we study and we do some of that work on our own. 5 ways to eliminate distractions is obviously on there. Overcoming distractions, strategies for that. How to use the Parkinson's law to your advantage. We're also going to talk about the Pomodoro, is that right? Pomodoro technique. How to be more productive as a homeschooling mother. We have so many hats that sometimes we have to max out that productivity the best that we can. The myth of multitasking, I thought was a great website. And then a great website on how to teach kids to relax. I've been really enthralled in this lately about how to calm the brain and how to help with anxiety and bring some of that peace back. And one of the people that I was listening to, and we'll definitely talk on this, he said that if we could teach children that number one skill, we might be able to cut down even in incarceration on kids. Because when our blood pressure gets up and we get a little bit raised, that's when we make some really stupid decisions. And so it's really important to teach our children calming techniques. Ways to stop multitasking, and then how to teach that EDGE method. We've kind of touched on that before. But I think when we're working at trying to create self-directed students, we want to try to teach them in this EDGE method the best that we can, so that we work ourselves out of a job. We're going to start here. This is actually, I'm not going to take those points in order. I thought I'd just start off with this one, but how to get this social network on board. And to tell you the truth, my parents were super supportive. I mean, 16 years ago when we started this, I was ready for a fight just because I knew this was super important to my husband and I, and had kind of, had my shackles up a lot because you'll come into interactions with that. Both of our parents were really fantastic about us taking this lifestyle on. And my father-in-law, who's not pictured here, he passed away in June. He was so kind. Like every time I came, he was amazing, and just really giving me the encouragement. But that's not normally the case. You'll always have a couple of people, and I did, I had a couple of people in my extended family that weren't happy about it, that had to tell me all the reasons why this was such a bad decision for our family. Sometimes you're trying to get your spouse on board, which is really a struggle. There are some great websites on that, but I'm not, like I said, I think most people at this point are now on board. You will probably get more flack now. What I've seen with this coronavirus, it seems like everybody understands what you're doing, except a few people with that are very highly associated with teachers unions. I have seen them giving us a lot more flack. And I think it's because they're scared. They're scared that we won't need teachers. We won't, but like we've talked about in many of our other sessions, it's not that we do not like teachers. We definitely like teachers. We love teachers, but we want to give families, educators, everybody a lot more options so that there's just a better variety, so that we can have education be more individualized, that meets every person's needs, every student's, every family's, and every teacher's. No, that's fine. That's fine. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, and really that's, I mean, where I want to take this is how to create this situation where it is more stable for kids, and that we're teaching them to have some focus and we're teaching them, because it is chaos. It is complete and utter chaos, and we're experiencing that in our own household. We have that situation going on with our daughter right now in her charter school, where they're now talking about changing things around. That was her choice, and she's still happy with that choice. But and that was one reason why I felt like our kids thrived in homeschool, because it was very consistent from year to year to year. They knew, I mean, as soon as school started, they knew exactly, they knew how that worked. And it didn't take any time for them to try to figure that out. They could dive right back into the learning. So when you are trying, when people ask you, and I would probably recommend, like I said, I had my shackles already up because I was expecting a lot of pushback, because I was a person who pushed back against homeschooling for sure. I mean, I was like Dustin, I was very skeptical of it. And like I said, it happened completely on accident, because I was not necessarily kind to people who were doing this before. And so I already knew what those objections might be. I would suggest that if people come to you and they talk to you about it, try to lead with the mindset of they're curious about what I'm doing. I was leading with the mindset of like, they want to fight me on this. And then you come across almost as a very angry and arrogant about it. Okay. Okay. And then people get that's when there starts to be a little bit of friction. And like I said, that's how I led many of my extended family that weren't happy about it. We've had some disagreements, and this has not been all rosy, even though both of our parents were very on board with it. But I'd hear all the time from them, and I wish I would have defended other people, because I'm a pretty type A personality, and which I don't think is actually the best way to homeschool now. I don't think if you're a type A, that's going to produce, like, yeah, my kids they knew exactly what they were doing, but at the same time, I didn't allow for a lot of creativity that I think could be in homeschooling. So I did hear a lot like, oh, but you're doing a fantastic job, but this person who's a hot mess wouldn't do a fantastic job. And I don't agree. I don't believe that anymore. But I would suggest that we lead with the positives. Think that they're coming to you because they're curious about what you're doing. And at this time, everybody's super curious. And lead with the positives. Talk about, oh, it's because of the customized learning. Or like Dustin said, we want consistency in our children's life, and we're not sure if that's going to be happening in the school system anymore. There's more time for social activities. That was one reason why I did it. I just saw my kids being able to use their time a lot more constructively, maybe. It provides closeness with families. It gives them time to serve other people. Those are, I just kind of try to make a list of maybe things that you could lead with the positives of why you're doing that. And then also talk about your why and emphasize that everyone gets to decide on their own. All choices are good. You're not saying that your choice, you're not going to disagree with their choice. And that was really, when I approached people in the past, it was almost like that. Like, I don't agree. They felt I was attacking their decision not to homeschool. But really, it came from a place of like, I was so defensive of what I was doing that I wasn't coming across very kind. So as kind as you can come across. But I also do suggest, like religion and politics, there are some topics that are best left undiscussed. And with some of my extended family, many of my siblings are definitely on board. Now that my children are older, they see that I didn't ruin them, but maybe some extended family that still don't agree. We have just agreed to disagree on this subject. They will compliment my family. They think we have an amazing family, and I take those compliments very graciously. And I still try to make sure that they're involved in our children's lives as well. So those would be my suggestions of trying to get your social network on board. I think that when you have a good social network, it makes it just so much easier. You're not always questioning why you're doing this. You have backup support when things get tough, because they will. And so anytime you can strengthen that social network about what your family's doing, I find it super helpful. Now we have that out of the way, we're going to talk a lot more about distractions. And distractions are one of those things, like when you're schooling your children at home, that can cause a lot of frustration and anger with the situation. Many times, like us as parents, we have so much going on, especially with this coronavirus. Many of us are working from home. So, we're already distracted with our own work. And then we have little children here that, if you pull away to work on something, then they're, off with the dog or something like that. So, distractions are really impossible to avoid. But statistics show that distractions cause just massive loss in productivity. And like I said, it causes a lot of frustration in life for sure. I don't know how you feel about that, Dustin. Do you ever, like, if you feel like you feel like you've had an unproductive day, do you get really frustrated with yourself? And maybe that's just something that I feel myself. Okay. Well, you don't have time for that for sure. Hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think, I think what made me think about the frustration in life is that, there's been, since this coronavirus thing happened, there's been an uptick in domestic abuse. And I think it's because there's just all of these things that are hitting us at once. If you're like me, like, telling you how I still have things to work on. So, yes, it is. It's stuff I work on, but I don't know if I'm ever going to get there for sure. I think one place that will help us with distraction is to keep a good schedule. I did an amazing interview with a person who he has a private school down in California, and that's something they teach their kids. They're more concerned about like, what does your schedule look? And they do like 20-minute blocks, like what does your schedule look like, and what are you going to follow? And I think that that's really wise because many times it helps us refocus ourselves if we get distracted. It's a very useful technique. And then also developing those habits is super important. And in other sessions, we're going to get into habit development, but I think really the crux of it is much like setting that schedule of what works for you. Yes, of course, we have to be flexible. I mean, that was one thing that I learned that type A personality was so poor at, is being flexible. And if something got me off my schedule, that's when my shackles would come up and I'd get a lot of anger would come forward, which I'm always talking about how we're trying to keep those positive emotions going. I'm saying that because I've learned this by experience for sure. But that schedule is very important to kind of help us always come back to staying focused. Another really great technique, we're going to talk about these two techniques on distraction, is really working with your children and yourself on this Parkinson's law. That's why setting those 20-minute blocks, I think, could be super helpful, because if you don't set a time for, to do certain things on your to-do list, they can take all day. One thing could take all day. If you only had one thing to do, it could end up taking you all day. So work expands to fill that time that's available for it to accomplish. I've heard so many people that say they've become a better writer when they go, okay, I'm going to just devote 30 minutes to writing, because, it helps just kind of get those juices flowing, and they, it kind of pushes them to come forward with some ideas. I think we've been criticized in the past, like we don't push our kids, but we want to teach that internal thing of like pushing yourself to set a time limit. So use that Parkinson's law to your advantage. And I think that was one of the websites that I've put on that resource page. Also, train your brain to make a game out of it. This Pomodoro technique is super helpful, I think. And I've tried doing this with my children, like the beat the clock game, and it was very helpful with all of them, but this last one, and he has not liked it at all. But it is helpful. It's helpful for me to do these things. This is all about mastering your time in 25-minute blocks. I said 20-minute blocks, but you can, whatever, 20, 25, half an hour, wherever you start to see yourself coming on focused, maybe that's the time to set that block for. But our minds are like muscles, and in order to use them effectively, we need to build it up. And focus actually has to be built up. And with all of our electronic devices, I think we have an extra hard time focusing for sure. So we need to train our brains to stay focused by gradually working on our concentration. And this will help us with that ability to focus for longer periods of time. A great way to do this is that Pomodoro method, in which you set a timer, you're completely focused on that task for a period of time. Whatever you deem it as. I think 20 to 25 minutes is good. Sometimes if it goes longer, that's when I see myself wander. And then when your timer goes off, you allow yourself like a 15-minute break to go and switch laundry around, or let your children play, or, you know, there's that 15-minute time. And those are really great brain breaks. We've talked about that in the past before. Our brains kind of need that anyway. And I've found too, I get less sleepy during the day when I'm kind of constantly up and down. If I sit down to write or to do a podcast or something, immediately I start like nodding off. And not that my podcasts are boring, but if I sit there too long, that's when I start feeling tired. So those stretches really are something that's more manageable. It helps to refocus our brain. It's kind of a little game if you're a person that likes to challenge themselves. And it's something that can kind of help us with being able to be better focused. Have you ever used this Pomodoro technique? Okay, super helpful. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Changing your under work on a task to completion. I mean, these are really powerful techniques that we're teaching our children. Let's move on to minimizing distractions. This is one of the slides that stayed the same. But a lot of times, like I said, you know, we're trying to teach our children at home, and making sure that they get the best possible schooling outside of that classroom is really important. And one of those barriers is distraction. And I got super distracted at school, but I think it can happen tenfold when you're home. You know, there's excessive noise. That's probably the biggest part, especially if you have toddlers. You sometimes have a toddler who's in watching a show, so they can hear the TV, or they can hear, you know, you're vacuuming or something, or the dog's barking at somebody, the mailman comes to the door. There's so many things that can take that does, you know, make extra noise and make it kind of hard to study. If you have a child that gets super distracted by stuff, maybe finding a study area away from that main living area where it's super noisy could be helpful for them. Technology now is a big distraction. My kids did online school. So, you know, as much as you can minimize those windows and those screens, is also a way to help with distraction. And I have another slide that has ways to also stay focused, and it's kind of the same thing, but just keeping everything cleared off as much as possible. Obviously, younger siblings can be a big distraction. Hopefully, we've talked a lot about trying to bring those children in so that they're, you know, part of the whole learning, but it's still a big distraction. And then definitely other people, you know, your neighbors calling, phone calls, friends, stuff like that. That is one of the advantages with coronavirus, is that a lot of people don't know now if you have your children home. So they are at least making an effort, but it's really important when you are homeschooling your children to let that social network know when those hours are best. Some people have taped things to their door, you know, just leave the package at the door because we're busy learning. I used to have a message on my phone because my mom would always forget, and she'd always call me during those homeschooling hours. And so I'd always like, if you're calling from this time to this time and I don't answer, it's because I'm homeschooling our kids, and, you know, I'll call you back later. Something like that, just to let people know, and try to do anything you can to make sure they don't interrupt that time, for sure. How to deal with distracted kids. I mean, this is really a struggle. This might be where, like I said, friction kind of enters into the home, because yeah, you got a zillion things you've got to do, and they've also got to stay on task with their things too. So these are some things that I've implemented to help with these distractions. First, we all learn differently. I had to learn that from my son. He actually learned better with headphones on and music playing, and that used to bug me. I used to and then I was talking to one of his online teachers, and he's like, "Oh, I do the same thing. You know, I always have music in the background." So so you really have to monitor what may be distracting for one person is just how actually another person can concentrate. So you want to communicate those distraction points with your kids. Some kids learn better with lots of noise around. That noise is actually really good, just background noise. It helps them focus. And then, so they need like more public space learning maybe, because it helps their mind from wandering. And then some people need more of a quiet place because the house noise is too frustrating for them. So definitely talk about what their distraction points are. Train attentiveness, and that's what we're going to talk about now. And we talked about some with the Pomodoro technique as well as the Parkinson's. Those are ways that we're trying to train their brains very early on, and agree to set, work with them on what that looks like. Setting that time for that assignment of how long they think that's going to take, and then set that timer. And they may find that they're like in a state of flow and they don't want to stop, which is fine, but at least it's something to kind of help them start with this whole idea of staying focused. Multitasking actually increases distractions. As a mom, I always, women are supposed to be better at multitasking, but really in a lot of ways we get less done with multitasking. What do you think about that? Yeah. Okay, that's very clear. And mhm, 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 mhm. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Well, and what's kind of changed my brain on the whole thing, and why I've changed this whole session around, is I've been listening to a neuroscientist called Andrew Herbener, I think is his name. And he was actually talking about that. Like a lot of people, and maybe I've steered people wrong in the past of like, oh, it's got to be something you love to do. It's got to be something, to reach that state of flow. But he said, no, our brains are not meant to, I mean, you have to work yourself into that state of flow. So yeah, sometimes we will, like when I'm working on a podcast, when I first start, I'm like, oh, I can't get this done. It's taking so long. And I start, nodding off or whatever, but it really does, like sometimes we have to push through that in order to get that done. Sometimes instead of timing myself, especially when I'm working on a podcast, but I'll actually like, okay, I got to get this much of it done before I can stop. And then that helps me with that focus. And like I said, maybe I've steered people wrong in the past of like, don't make your kids do stuff that they hate, which is true. Like if you love it, you're going to stay more focused on it. But at the same time, there will be things that they, like Dustin and I've talked about in the past, that they're not going to necessarily love to do. But that's also like teaching them like, yeah, it takes a while for your brain to get into it, so just stay with this task, and then we'll see how you feel about it in 20 minutes or so. um does that make sense? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Love that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question to ask yourself. I mean, I find, or what skill, what skill do I not know how to get this done? Because sometimes there's a gap in there. You want to get to that, but you can't get over the gap. So I love that question. And that's really important to teach our kids, I think, too, of like, always constantly be questioning yourself of like, what's stopping you from doing this thing that you want to do? And then, how can we work on that? The other thing I kind of threw in here at the last minute was teaching our children how to calm our brains and center ourselves is very important to teach them good focus. And that's one thing I've learned from this neuroscientist is that this is a skill that we really haven't taught our children very, very well. And too many times when they get heated and they get frustrated or whatever, that's when their behavior gets bad. And so I think always kind of coming back to that of like, okay, we need some time to center yourself, but we're going to work on focus, and then we'll come back to teaching that centering and teaching them how to control those emotions. I just really love this slide about different things to focus, keeping food at your desk sometimes help with focus, turning off your phone. The neuroscientist actually says he locks his in a safe because it's that much of a distraction. Getting a good chair, because that can, if you're not comfortable, sometimes that helps with focus. Making that list, I think, is super important. Keeping it short too. Maybe sometimes we get too many things on the list, and then that starts to feel that overwhelm makes us get distracted. I love that. Uh-huh. Yeah. Little, yeah, tiny baby steps, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that helps with your focus because you're feeling successful for sure. Headphones, anything that you have to do. It's funny how if you put on headphones, all of a sudden people are like, oh, you must be busy, and they'll leave you alone. So sometimes putting on headphones is super important. Clearing your desk, but that also can expand to having too many little folders on your desktop, or too many little folders on your phone. I'm guilty of that. So anything you can do to just clear your desk. I think decluttering your life is very helpful for focus for sure. Shutting things off that you're not really using, and I mean, it can go to our phone, but it can be other little things that maybe extra little noises in the background, like if you just are letting the TV run or something. Sometimes that. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, just be sure to minimize that as much as possible. I've already talked about timing yourself with that Pomodoro technique. The reward can be, like you said, to take that 15-minute break, I think is actually a thing to help you refocus. And I think with little kids, especially, we talked about this last time about those reward systems that work. If we can teach them the focus, teach them some type of way to reward themselves, hopefully non-food, Because I mean, I would be as big as a house if I was always rewarding myself with food, but definitely something that makes them feel accomplished. That might just be taking a walk, getting time to play on, my son's been playing board games by himself, which is super sad. But I mean, stuff like that you get to just do for a few minutes by yourself, I think is really important. Framing those goals so that you're looking at them every morning before you go to work. That's another very powerful thing, I think, to teach our kids, is to always be having a goal too. And I don't understand this bring your pets with you. They help you stay focused. Do you agree with that? I don't think so. Yeah, yeah. I always sometimes I'll have a dog down below me, and I'm always playing with it. So I don't know if that's really true. And I know pets can help us feel better, so maybe that's part of it. But all right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's true. And I love that, because there are days that I wake up and I'm looking for like a theme song for my day, something to get my batteries charging. And I actually find myself doing that as I listen to the song. I don't listen to it all day, but I definitely listen to it like 3 or 4 times, maybe even five. And then I might listen to it later on and stuff. But making a theme song for your day might just help you add just that tiny little bit of extra, I don't know, drive to do something for sure. 7 ways to keep focus and conquer those distractions. This is a great acronym to have, but focus. Oh, whoops, sorry, my board is super sensitive here. But the acronym for focus is follow one course until successful. And that's what I think that neuroscience scientist was really talking about, is that we're trying to always kind of work on that, where we're knowing, that's where that distraction comes in, but we have to stay the course until we're successful sometimes, and not letting ourselves kind of, if we find ourselves getting distracted, that's a perfect time to kind of bring it back into what we're supposed to be doing. And I think we've talked a lot about these things already. This was an old slide that I just kept in here. Clear all the physical and mental clutter, creating that to-do list, avoid multitasking, having those regular timed breaks is really important. Know the best time to work. I think that's really important too. Like, I actually work better probably in the morning. Unfortunately, the way my schedule goes, sometimes I end up working more at night. But my husband's kind of in his groove at night. It's actually, we're opposites in that way. But I think that's really important for your kids too, when you're homeschooling them. Yeah, you may be a morning person, but for them, they might feel better later in the day. Like, my daughter actually about 10 wakes up every day. I mean, as a teen, I think that's pretty normal, but knowing those best times to get that flow, I think you're less frustrated with yourself if you know that too. Limit your caffeine intake. Do you ever have caffeine crashes? Yeah, yeah. I wish I could figure out another way to do that, but I probably take in too much caffeine too. But I have heard though, and I kind of wonder if that's why I'm super tired today. I was telling you before we even started this session that I'm just feeling really like I just can't get myself moving today. And I think part of it was my caffeine intake. And I know I used to drink rock stars. Do you drink rock stars? Oh my gosh, I used to do that. Okay. Yes. No. Yeah. And I started having like heart palpitations. I felt Yeah, yeah, and so I stopped drinking rock stars altogether. My husband used to drink. He was a big, and he still occasionally has it, but I think it's not good for your heart. But we swap out other things, you know. I either have like a Coke Zero, or I have something else to replace it for sure. So if anyone has any great ideas of how to, you know, keep your mind awake and alert without caffeine, I'd love some ideas on that. Okay. I guess if you're in Oregon, you're fine with them. But so these are some great techniques for just trying to teach our kids how to calm themselves and how to promote relaxation. And like I said, I think a lot of kids could stay out of trouble if we just taught them some of these relaxation techniques. And this was from a website that I found actually from a school teacher, but I really think we could readjust this for our home. Playing calm music, or playing music that feels that helps them feel better, can and that helps promote that calming effect. Sometimes having some background noise. I used to do that a lot when my kids were little. Like on my desktop, I would just play. Oh, sorry, I would just play like some kind of quiet music like that, and I think they found it pretty calming like that. It's usually like primary music or something. Build in some type of yoga time or exercise time into your day. Taking a walk with your kids, I think, is really important. That was another thing I was learning from this neuroscientist, that movement that we do side to side when we're walking, that our eyes kind of naturally do, actually helps calm down the amygdala, and it helps to calm us. So anytime that you can get out, it doesn't work as quite as well in your car, but anytime that you can get out and move, the movement of that body with the walking actually helps to calm the mind. So those are super powerful things to teach our children. With that daily exercise, yoga, I'm not really into yoga, but I know, you know, it's a great way to calm yourself and come to that meditation. Also practicing meditation. And I think many times we think that this is all, you're sitting in the Zen position and all of that stuff. But I think you can help them come to that meditation just really easily by turning off the lights. This teacher actually would have the kids put their head on their desk and just close your eyes and just take some time to meditate. This works really good when your kids are re-entering, you know, if they come in from outside and you're trying to get them back to work. Sometimes it's good to practice some meditation. Teach mindfulness activities. You know, try to teach your children, like, to really listen to themselves. I feel like our generation, or my generation of, I'm a Gen Xer, we were always taught to shove those feelings down. And because of that, I've suffered like with other problems because I wasn't listening to myself. I think that's really kind of important to come back with that with our kids, where we help draw attention to, like, how are you feeling? What's the emotion? And I think when you can declare it, you can declare what emotion you're feeling, you can um, you can change it better. Does that make sense? Like, when we don't know what we're feeling, a lot of times it will just fester in us. And unfortunately, I did that for years and years. I was probably not as good of a mother because I wouldn't pay attention to what was going on. But some great mindfulness activities often include listening to music, coloring, practicing breathing. Once again, if we can teach our kids to calm themselves and those emotions, I think we're going to teach kids to be able to we'll teach kids that are proactive, not reactive in some ways. Anyway, some great ideas for that. Also practice those slow breathing techniques, controlling that breath and controlling those emotions at the same time. You know, when you catch that your children are maybe frustrated with something or whatever, it's a great time to teach them breathing techniques. And you can get online and learn how to do some really effective ones for your children, for sure. But and how to do that with them. But this is one thing I kept in, but I'm horrible at this. I was a phone schooler for a long time. I'm not a homeschooler, but my phone was distracting to me, which would end up distracting to my children and stuff. And so sometimes I had to think about, like, why am I always like pulling my phone back in? And part of it is I was feeling really lonely. I think we have a desire to always feel connected with other people. That's one thing that really bothers me about this lockdown, is that we as people, we're designed for community. And so sometimes that's why we get on social media, but it ends up being there's really no connection there at all. Sometimes we believe too, like anytime we bring in our phone, we're feeling more productive, but that's really a myth, because there's really, unless you're learning a language on your phone, there's not a lot else on there that makes us feel productive. I don't even like to check my email on it anymore, because maybe I'm getting too old and I can't type out a message as well, but and that's something I think we need to get away from, is that it's just really more of a distraction. And sometimes my phone is a way to escape. Let's face it, life is hard, homeschooling is hard, and sometimes we use that as an escape for things. What I found though is that sometimes I'm physically tired, or I'm emotionally tired, or spiritually tired. But when I can recognize that, I actually can use a better modality than my phone to make me feel better. And so we really want to be honest with ourselves, of like, when you catch yourself dragging in your phone again, why am I doing this? And part of it was because I needed some way to disconnect, for sure. And then it becomes a habit. It becomes this defaulting habit that we make without even thinking about it, and we're not consciously choosing it anymore. And we want to, really focus on trying to get rid of that default habit of picking up the phone. 3 ways to stop being distracted by your phone. First, we have to focus. We have to concentrate our attention and energy on something. Why have you chosen to, I have online school, but why have you chosen to homeschool your kids, and try to always refocus yourself. Choose to be present. Sometimes when we use our phone, we're not being present with the people that we're with. And that's one thing that's really bothered me sometimes when I was really glad I never had a phone when my children were really little, because sometimes I'll be out in the community and I'll see the parents and they're both on their phone and the kids are just sitting there, and I'm just like, this is a lost opportunity. We may be there with our kids, but it breeds so much disconnection that we're not really being present at the time. So we want to put those away as much as possible and spend time with the people we're actually with. And make sure that we connect with people, not just online, but in real life too, which is really hard with the coronavirus. It's kind of a lifestyle change to go back to building those healthy connections and those healthy relationships with our kids. And we want to teach them to do that as well. We want to build that strong family connection. And because families that are connected, they have a strong foundation of a spiritual, emotional, and physical well-being. And so anytime that we can get rid of our phone and actually pay attention to our families is helpful. And then you won't get so frustrated. Like if you're distracted, then that's when all hell will break loose. Your kids will run rampant, for sure. Just know that we're mentoring these behaviors. Our kids are always watching us, and they imitate everything that we do. We are mimetic creatures. We're meant to model, or we're meant to mirror people. And most of us realize that modeling is a powerful teaching tool, yet we don't consider how how we are teaching those skills with technology too. So, if we make a commitment to control media instead of letting it control us, being mindful how we're using our phones, our computers, or other technology, setting an example for our children of always refocusing yourself, setting your own schedule, being fully focused and present. Our children are picking up those cues more so than what we're teaching them. So many times when we start homeschooling, we're more worried about what we're teaching them instead of why we're teaching them. And that's, I guess, my focus in a lot of these classes has been to take it back to that why. I think you'll get more enjoyment out of the process, and then we'll really be teaching our children habits that they'll take with them for the rest of their lives. I love this quote by was it L.R. Knotts, and she teaches gentle parenting, but she says every day in 100 small ways, our children are asking, do you see me, do you hear me, do I even matter to you? And their behavior often reflects our response, and kids pick up body language and what we're doing, I mean, they are watching more of our emotion on our face and what we're doing with our bodies more so than we would even know. So just be sure that we're mentoring that the best that we can. I always like to end with just being gentle with yourself. I teach the stuff, but like I said, most of the stuff that I was teaching, I'm actually talking to myself. It's stuff that I struggle with. So I just, we have to kind of go back to just, okay, I'm going to try better tomorrow, and we'll, try to do better. Did you have anything to add, Dustin, before we? Uh, I haven't heard of that one. Deep work. Okay. Definitely. That's a good one. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. My sister does too. Yep. Mm-hmm. It's it really is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I know we already know short-term effects, and we already know that our focus has decreased. We already know too that our phone is storing so many little numbers for us that we're not learning like we did before. Because actually remembering codes and remembering, I mean, I remember I had at least what 20, 25 phone numbers memorized, is actually really good exercise for your brain. And so I think it's going to have really long-term effects, not to mention relationships. If you're out on a date with your spouse, I've left my phone home before. It's super important to do that. Same thing with your kids though. Like when you're with your kids, and I'm, like I said, I'm the worst at this. And I think that's my son. I watch him and he's always on some type of a device. And every time I get frustrated with him, I'm like, oh boy, where's he learning that from? He's learning that from me, really. And so we really want to try to minimize, want to put technology kind of in its proper place where it's not controlling us, we're controlling it. So, all right. Do we have any questions at all? Okay. Yeah, yes. No questions. All right. Well, we are skipping next week because of Thanksgiving. We're not going to have a session, but join us in 2 weeks. We're going to move more like into Christmas time stuff of like how to get stuff done in life while we're homeschooling. And then I think I'm going to combine that with one of the other lessons where we talk about giving gifts that really matter. I think is really important. Gifts that help us learn and serve other people. There was one thing I did want to mention on, keeping ourselves moving from distractions. Sometimes we have to really think about distractions because every day I pray, like, help me to find somebody who might need help. But if I'm constantly concentrating on my list and trying to be productive, I don't let that inspiration follow. And I think that's important, whether you're a spiritual person or not. We all feel inspired to be doing something, and if something gets us off track, not to be so annoyed with it, but to realize like, oh, maybe this is kind of meant to happen this way. And that was one thing I think I wish I were better at that because I'm, like I said, super type A personality, but I see people who can, like, they feel inspired, like, oh, I should go visit this neighbor, and their life is so much richer for it. So that would be the only other thing I'd add. So, okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, well, I have stuff to do too. So, all right.